Hey y'all, Gregor here with another new video, this time going over the alleged new OTA that is supposed to drop on May 23rd. Some very interesting changes, some of them very much needed after the last changes that were made. Let's get into it. So it looks like the new balance update was leaked, so there are a few different changes coming, changing the overall meta game. I'm excited for these changes, specifically the one that there's a few that I'm really excited about, but the ones that I'm most excited for, Leech, obviously. The Leech change was a mistake. Making Leech a 4 cost at 2 just shuts down so many deck archetypes. The other one I'm looking forward to is Werewolf by Night. I think we're going to see Bounce make a comeback, especially right before Sasquatch is coming out next week. Some of the other ones, there are a lot of nerfs. One of the other buffs, we got Captain America, Grandmaster, nerfs to Spectrum, Leech, Luke Cage, Sentry, Baron Mordo as well, which I'm not entirely sure why. I don't think Baron Mordo's been getting a lot of play. That one kind of surprised me. But Leader got a little buff as well. I like that. I think there's more nerfs than buffs. So let's get into the actual balance update. This is based off of their internal metrics, trying to keep the meta as healthy as possible and aim for more balanced targets. So first off, this is one that I was super excited to see. Let me just zoom in a little bit more. Our boy Captain America. So Cap is finally getting a little bit of love. I feel like he deserves this. He deserved this way earlier. The fact that US Agent got a buff before Captain America really disappointed me. Not a huge change. His ongoing used to be your other cards have +1 power. His new one is he is changed from a 3/3 to a 3/2. Instead of ongoing being your other cards have +1 power, it is now your other ongoing cards here have +2 power. This does a few things. It allows newer users to get access to that Spectrum ongoing deck that's been doing rounds. They may not have access to cards like Punisher or Jean Grey or some of those other cards, so it gives them some options as they're slowly building out their collection. As you may have seen in various social media discussions, we've been reluctant to buff Captain America. The reason for that aren't necessarily obvious, but they include keeping the early game simple and maintaining existing tutorials. However, this change we eventually arrived at shouldn't threaten either of those. While Spectrum is a strong deck on the competitive side, the Spectrum deck performs worse for new players with smaller collections. This should be a tidy buff to the archetype for early series players. So this is obviously a good thing. Good change. I still think he could use a little bit more. Maybe a change. I feel like Terry and I were talking about this. They haven't utilized his shield. That is one of his things. Thor has his hammer. Could we get Captain America his shield maybe and do a little change with him? The next one is Spectrum. This is in regards to the Captain America buff. So Spectrum used to be a 6/7. Spectrum is changing from a 6/7 to a 6/6. Still the on reveal, give your ongoing cards +2 power. Of course, the cap change is pretty decent buff to existing strong Spectrum decks too. We want these decks to hold a spot in the metagame, so we've given a lot of rope while waiting to see if cards like Enchantress would be enough to fight back. However, the deck has remained a top performer and approached levels that would require a rebalance that made the cap buff above more dangerous. So this is a small compensatory nerf to keep things in balance. Luke Cage. Not sure how I feel about this one. I thought Luke Cage was kind of in a fine spot. So Luke Cage is ongoing. Your cards can't have their power reduced. His old was 3/4. They're changing into a 3/3. Not a huge change. One of the best cards in the top Spectrum decks, Luke Cage does extra work by also hampering Afflict decks a bit, making it harder for them to contend for the metagame crown. A slightly weaker Luke Cage is good for these decks and also paves the way to slot Luke into successful Cerebro shells once more. I didn't think about the Cerebro change. Yeah, that makes him a option for C3. So that's not bad, actually. This might actually be a buff now that I think about it with C3. Baron Mordo, I'm not sure about this change. So his on reveal, your opponent draws a card and set its cost to 6. His old was 2/3. On reveal, your opponent draws a card, set its cost to 6. The new is 2/3. On reveal, the top card of your opponent's deck costs 6 until turn 6. This definitely feels like a nerf. Baron Mordo has long been one of the weakest cards in Marvel stat, often functioning as a worse Yondu for players. And that drawback could mean your opponent could just get a free card. This tweak to the original design maintains the disruptive intent, but make sure the effect is more strictly negative for your opponent. Yeah, I'm not entirely sold on it. So if it's set to 6 until turn 6, it just switches back to normal. So not entirely sold on this one. The Grandmaster change I think is great. Grandmaster hasn't been seeing a lot of play. Grandmaster is like the diet variant of Absorbing Man. We have Absorbing Man at home. That's Grandmaster here. On reveal, move one of your other on reveal cards here to the middle location. Its abilities happen again. So they've changed him from a 2-0 to a 2-2. This is a significant but fairly straightforward change to a card beloved by many players that's failed to find a role in the metagame. While we often aim cards high on release, Grandmaster was a unique case where we felt our testing was unlikely to identify the best possible thing to do with the card. It's just got so many potential applications. It turns out that they were too conservative, so we're trying out a sizable buff. I hope this makes it so we see more Grandmaster play in the future. I like Grandmaster as a card. I like him as a 2-slot, so hopefully we see him in more decks. This is one of the ones that I'm most exciting for. I've been saying this for a while. Werewolf by Night doesn't make sense as a 4-4. He should be switched to a 3, which is exactly what they've done. So his old was 4-4. After you play a card, move there to gain +2 power if it has on reveal. The change from 4-4 is changed to a 3-1. This is great, lowering the cost, allowing you to do more bounces, getting +2 for each one. I think this is going to have a huge impact on the metagame. I think we're going to see bounce pop off again, especially with Sasquatch coming out next week. It is going to be wild. I think Sasquatch, Black Swan, Werewolf by Night, great synergy. Werewolf by Night is a card we've been reticent to let live at 3 cost, as the sheer amount of leaping can get out of hand fast. That said, in the months since its original release, we've also seen a lot of strong and successful experimentation among 3 costs, and Werewolf seems a lot more fair in today's world than it did upon release. Plus, being able to start with a small amount of power is more evocative of the Werewolf canon we want the card to communicate. Starting weak, becoming a monster. That makes sense to me. Leader. This change I'm okay with as well. So his old was 6-2. On reveal, copy the enemy's card with the highest power, played this turn, but on your side. The change from 6-2 to 6-3, so he's getting a little bit of a buff. Probably not a lot of leaders on the balance bingo card at home, but this card has been languishing of late. We were hopeful that leader stocks would rise with the release of Red Hulk, as that made leader a clean answer to one of the best 6-cost cards in the game, but that's not what wound up happening. This buff isn't likely to move the needle in a big way, and we wouldn't want to. Leader's not a card players enjoy seeing too often. Even so, there's enough room to improve that we feel confident a point of power will be a small but helpful bump. I like Leader. I like Leader in Sandman decks. That's usually where I play him. He plays very well with Blink as well. So I like this change. This change was definitely needed. I do not know why they changed Leech to a 4-2 in the first point. I feel like we could obviously see that it would affect beyond just Annihilus and Hela, as they say in this article. So many deck archetypes rely on reveal on 5 and 6. Also, Supergiant was a way to get around Leech when he was a 5 cost. Putting him at 4 completely makes it so Leech doesn't get hit by that Supergiant. So there was no reason to Supergiant for Leech. So his old stats were on reveal, remove the text from cards with on reveal abilities in your opponent's hand. He's been changed from a 4-2 to a 5-5. They've given him better stats. I think he needs to stay at a 5 cost. Speaking of unexpected outcomes, we decided to take Leech back to 5 cost. Our primary Leech target with the initial move to 4 cost was Annihilus, though we did see value in strengthening one of the few answers to a handful of other powerful endgame threats, Hela. However, Annihilus wasn't substantially affected by the increased presence of Leech, and the win rate for Leech itself grew higher than we'd hoped to see against other strategies, narrowing the range of competitive viability with the game. Of course, we've also heard the public discontent around leaning this hard on Leech as a valve within the metagame, and we've determined we don't want this card bearing that kind of weight. That said, 5-3 was not really playable, so we're going back to some more power in an effort to keep Leech meaningful. Now that he's 5, you can Supergiant and he won't flip on turn 5. Happens at the end of the game. Also, the fact that he was a 4, he played into Blink so well. You could put Blink 4-2 on 4, Blink on 5, swap it out for a huge card, a Red Hulk, a Leader, a Doctor Doom, what have you, a Darkhawk. And there was just way too much value out of that. Yeah, I just don't think it was a good idea to change him to a 4-2 in the first place. But I am glad that they are making the change, and they made it quickly. Sentry. This one also makes sense. Sentry's very strong. They're changing Sentry from a 4-10 and -10 for the Void for the power. The old was 4-10. You can't play at the right location on reveal. Add a -8 power Void to the right location. So they're changing him from a 4-10 to a 4-8. And the Void from a -10 to a -8. We have determined it necessary to weaken the Annihilus shell in the interest of metagame health and this adjustment is in pursuit of that goal. We'd hope to avoid it entirely. Sentry at 10 power is a more interesting card, especially with stuff like Scar. To that end, we've explored potential revisions to Annihilus instead, but weren't able to find a change we could stand on confidently in time for this OTA. We may revisit Sentry later if that work proves more fruitful. But for now, we're just reducing some of the bite that combo packs by reverting Sentry to its original stats. Was he really originally a 4-8? I don't even remember that. I remember him always being a 4-10. Very interesting. Well, that's good. You can't be hit by Shang-Chi anymore. So that's also, he falls under Shang-Chi range. That's all for this week. Until next time, happy snapping. This is all alleged, but the same source that we got it from last time turned out to be true with the leech changes. So I think this is pretty likely to happen on the 23rd. What are your thoughts? What do you think of the changes? Are you happy with them? Do you think they should make other changes? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe. Share helps a ton. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. I'll catch you next time.